Hello and welcome to the latest Royal Roundup from Talk TV. So pop the kettle on, this is the Royal Tea. I'm Sarah Hewson. It is full steam ahead to the coronation. With just 2 weeks to go, we know more now about who's playing, who's attending, and more importantly, who's not attending. But do the public care? Joining me to discuss all that and more are royal commentator and Talk TV regular Afua Hagan, royal commentator Rupert Bell and royal commentator Emily Andrews. Now, the majority of the British public don't care about the coronation. That is according to a YouGov poll. Additionally, more than half of Britons don't think the King's coronation should be funded by the government. Afua, the polls would suggest a level of apathy, I guess, leading up to the coronation. We're not that far off now. What's your sense of the public mood?
Yeah, we are in the final countdown, are we? And it seems definitely a lot more muted than, say, the Platinum Jubilee. I do think there's definitely a sense of apathy, but I also think there's a sense of like a rise of Republican feeling, a rise of, especially amongst young people and especially amongst young Scots, thinking, why do we need the monarchy? What is the point of the royal family? And we are still in the grip of a cost of living crisis. In the past few weeks, we've had stories about, £8 million being spent to send pictures of King Charles III out to public buildings. And of course, the cost of the coronation, which is estimated, some estimates have put it at £25 million, some estimates have put it at £100 million. I think anything in that ballpark at this time, people feel is really unnecessary when they're still struggling to pay their bills, feed their children. As we hopefully get warmer, there'll be less worries about heating and energy prices, but that's going to come around again. Remember, we also have swathes of public servants on strike, whether that's teachers, whether that's doctors, whether that's nurses or other civil servants that work in the passport office. So this is the backdrop against which the coronation is taking place. And I think people think that we should be focusing more on that and perhaps not spending all this money on this event. So I think it's a lot of things. It's the cost of living crisis and it's a real rise in Republican feeling.
Emily, if you walk into shops now, you're starting to see all of the coronation products and merchandise out on display. Some coronation chicken crisps that I sampled even at the weekend. Do you think this is going to build over the next couple of weeks, or is it because it's, as Afua said, that within the context of where we are at the moment, and also less than a year since the big Platinum Jubilee celebrations?
Well, I think there are a number of factors, and Afua, and you've just identified some of them. Cost of living crisis, last year was a Platinum Jubilee. I think that explains why not so many people are having garden parties or streets are being closed. I think also the weather is going to play a big, as ever in Britain, the weather is going to play a big factor. If it's a beautiful day like it is today, I think it will go without a hitch. It'll be amazing. And we'll all be sitting here at the Royal Tea the week after. Wasn't that amazing? Everyone was so delighted. Everyone was celebrating across the land. It's also quite a British thing, I think, in our national psyche, is that we don't get very excited ahead of these big national moments. But when they're actually upon us, we all sort of turn to each other and go, oh, great, yes, let's have a jolly good party. We are a nation that is still, despite everything, we are not as extrovert as perhaps some of our European neighbours. And obviously, post-COVID, bringing us all together, that's, I think, still a factor. But I think the other factor, sorry, Charles, is that there are still quite a few people up and down the country. I think the apathy of the young people could be to do with this, but there's still a lot of people up and down the country who don't want Camilla as Queen and who don't approve of what happened with Charles and Camilla's relationship. It is ancient history, but there is still that sentiment.
What about the plans for protests? I know you've just come from the Grand National, so you're all over protests.
I'm protested out.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Look, it's a free country. Now, if I put the Grand National hat on, the police worked and said, right, we were happy to work with organisers, and we've heard it about the London Marathon. I went to an open press conference for the golf in Liverpool back in July yesterday, and one of the things they were saying, we're already working and we're happy to work with people who and give them an area to protest. And actually, not everyone agrees with the monarchy, so I don't see that as a problem. The world has changed since 1953, so if people want to protest and don't believe in it, they have every right to protest as long as it doesn't get out of hand. And I think that's the important thing with this. And talking about the crowds, the Platinum Jubilee, I spoke to an organiser and they said they were actually overwhelmed by the response. Even in their planning, they thought they would get that many, but we got more. So there might just also be a real sense of caution again, saying that's why we're only doing a 1 mile free route or whatever it is, because we're not sure. But actually, if the weather, as you say, is nice, they might actually then end up being taken aback. I think it's a movable feast between now and the coronation as to how many come to London, and bearing in mind it is also expensive to come to London as well.
Very much so. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are included in the official souvenir programme for the coronation of King Charles III and Queen Camilla. A family portrait from 2018 has been featured, and it includes Harry and Meghan. Emily, what do you make of the decision to include this? Nothing happens by accident, does it? This was a portrait taken around Charles's 70th birthday with the Waleses, as they are now, and the Sussexes, along with Charles and Camilla. Is it an olive branch?
I certainly think we're using the phrase olive branch a lot over the last couple of weeks. Yes, it is. I think it was a very sensible decision. We know that Charles is a stickler for detail. I'm sure that he would have signed this off himself. It was a picture that was done for his 70th birthday. Of course, we know that actually organising that picture was quite tricky, and Chris Jackson did a brilliant job in having a lovely picture of the then Cambridges, all the Cambridge children, and Grandpa Wales, and obviously Harry and Meghan. It's a bit sad, actually, I think, that that's the last family picture that there is. And of course, that was 4 years ago. So yes, great decision by the King to include it in the coronation programme.
To say you are very much a part of this family.
Absolutely, you are very much a part of this family. And of course, if we hark back to what Harry did in his round of interviews to promote Spare, that's what he said. He said, I want a family, not an institution. And I think perhaps even, in the negotiations over him coming to the coronation ceremony, he was upset because it was Buckingham Palace who reached out with the email inviting him rather than a direct phone call from his father. Once the two of them did speak, that then smoothed it over. So I think very sensible.
But in terms of further clear the air chats with his father and other members of the family, notably his brother, it doesn't seem like there's going to be time around the coronation weekend for that to take place.
And actually now is not the time to do that. I think Harry coming to the coronation is definitely an icebreaker. Emily, you mentioned them having the conversation before he attends. That was definitely an icebreaker. And I actually don't think this is the time for them to have any big conversations. I think actually things are too fresh. And also we know that Harry is literally making a flying visit. He'll be there for the ceremony and then he's off back to California, presumably to celebrate Archie's birthday. And, Charles and Camilla will be very, very focused on what is a hugely monumental day with lots of moving parts, and it's going to be very intense for them. Now is not the time for them to have any sort of reconciliation
big,
conversations.
deep and meaningful.
Not at all. That will come later down the line, I hope, anyway.
And what kind of reception will he get from family members? Friends and sources close to Camilla revealed last weekend that she was hurt by the way she was depicted as the villain, the evil stepmother in Harry's memoir Spare, and in the interviews he gave to promote it. She's known as the Lady Boss. Rupert, how do you think that relationship will be and will evolve now?
It's going to need some long heart-to-hearts, because at one stage, he said how much he valued her support. So I think there's a lot of eye-rolling with the rest of the family. Total frustration that this has come to this, and other members of the family, when they hear, they feel a sense of disappointment and being let down. So this is not the time of the coronation. Yes, they're glad Harry's there. I think one or two members of the royal family might be very pleased that Meghan's not there as well. So I think this is not the time. It's for him, as that picture showed, there's a family there that the king wants around him, but it's going to take a long process. We know when families have this kind of situation, It is not resolved overnight, and it's not easy by the fact that he's in the other side of America as well, which creates an added problem.
And Lady Lansdowne, Camilla's close friend, described her approach to this incident and much that has gone on over the past few decades as least said, soonest mended, that you just get on with it. Has that approach paid off, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And you and I, Sarah, have met Camilla many times. On a personal level, I really like her. She's charming, funny, interested, always remembers your name, what you've been doing, your children's names. And I think she is of that generation and that mentality. You just get on with it. There's no point in focusing on the past and what's gone before, and there's the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune. You just look forward. And yes, I'm sure, as Lady Lansdowne said, she will have been hurt. Who wouldn't have been hurt to be called the villain, the wicked stepmother that, you know, everyone was sacrificed, particularly Harry was sacrificed on her PR altar, just to essentially become queen? I personally just don't think that's true. And so absolutely, she just gets on with it and focuses to the future. I mean, I think Camilla's always been very careful in her relationship with Harry and William. I mean, if the truth be told, yes, obviously Harry and William said kind things publicly when Charles and Camilla got married, but it's always been a tricky relationship. I think William has matured himself and has got to realise a bit more of the totality of perhaps that situation of the 80s and the 90s. And I think perhaps Harry is perhaps still stuck as that 13-year-old boy, obviously, who lost his mother.
And what about Emily's point of fear that there is a proportion of the public who still can't accept Camilla as our queen? We know the protest will be not our king, but what about Camilla as our queen? Because she is to be crowned alongside him.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I've said this before, if this was 1997 and we were having the conversation, I think we would have laughed at the prospect of there being King Charles coronated alongside Queen Camilla. I mean,
and her friend said she would have
absolutely
completely flabbergasted to think that she could ever be queen at that point.
When their, you know, opinion poll ratings were in single digits. And I think there was a real sense that, especially when the invitation came out and she was styled as Queen Camilla, that there was lots and lots of discussion around then, and there will continue to be, of people who, whether they were, you know, a quote unquote fan of Princess Diana or not, you know, if you take that out of the equation, who still just don't accept the relationship of King Charles and Queen Camilla, who also don't accept the styling of her as Queen Camilla. There's still a lot of people who feel that way. And I think that is also to do with the strength of feeling and the depth of feeling that a lot of people had for Queen Elizabeth II. I don't think that same grace will be afforded to King Charles and Queen Camilla, unfortunately. They won't be as popular as Queen Elizabeth II was. So I think there's an element of that in there as well. But, you know, 25 years after the death of Princess Diana to Queen Camilla being coronated, or nearly 26 years now, it really is a PR masterclass. It absolutely is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it should be taught in universities, because
I think it will.
I think it will as
Mark
well,
Boland.
because it is an absolute masterclass in turning it around.
From that 2005, it was, appearance outside the Ritz when they were first photographed together on an engagement, to where we are here, 18 years later.
I think it's also a testament to Camilla.
Yes.
You've got to actually know that it takes two to get this right. And Camilla, so supportive of her husband. She wanted to make sure that she didn't rush it. She knew and understood that the public were, to some extent, against her. So she had to play the game. Her way of dealing with it, right? Slowly, slowly, we will bring people around. I'll just get on with my work. And you alluded to the fact that she remembers everybody, she's interested. That's how she's done it, by being just
She actually took
person.
a step back, didn't she, when William and Harry invited her to the Guards Chapel, to the service.
To commemorate
Princess Diana's, and she felt it wouldn't be right for her to be there despite the invitation.
She's very conscious of everything that has gone before. And look, everyone's going to have different opinions, and I respect that. And obviously, you know, the narrative can be rewritten. But if you look at what actually happened, as I understand it, you know, yes, Charles and Camilla were in a relationship before Charles started dating Diana, and probably that did continue until Charles and Diana got married. But after that, it did stop. And it wasn't until Lady Susan Hussey, Charles's godmother, phoned Camilla in about 85, 86. Prince Charles was desperately unhappy. I mean, the marriage had fallen apart behind closed doors. And it was Lady Susan Hussey, apparently, who phoned Camilla. There was no communication between Charles and Camilla at this point, and said, Charles is desperately unhappy. Please see him. Camilla contacted him. They went for lunch. And so, I mean, look, I think the blame game is not particularly apposite or helpful about, Diana was having affairs and Charles was having affairs. These were three very unhappy people because Camilla had chosen Andrew Parker Bowles over Charles, but then quickly realised what a philanderer, her husband was. So all three of them had very, very unhappy personal lives. And I think the phrase is, let the person without sin cast the first stone. I think we have to kind of move on. And as Rupert said, I think Camilla has been very, very sensitive to that kind of history.
Lady Pamela Hicks was absent from the guest list for the King's coronation. Lady Pamela, whose father, Earl Mountbatten of Burma, was Prince Philip's uncle, attended the Queen's funeral last September. And afterwards, her daughter, India Hicks, divulged that her mother hoped to be one of the very few people to have attended 3 coronations: King George VI in 1937, the Queen's in 1953, and Charles's in 2023. Rupert, the guest list is leading to some awkward conversations, perhaps. Is this going to lead to difficulties with members of the family and the aristocracy?
Because there's only room for 2,000, there are going to be disappointed people. And I know people. I was travelling up on the train here today with someone who says every year they get a Christmas card from Charles and Camilla, and he went to the last coronation, not in the house, but actually sat outside in the stand because his father decided not to go inside, but he ended up sitting outside watching it coming in as a 15-year-old lad, 3 seats away from Noel Coward. So as some memory, but he said, well, I could have gone, but now I sort of understand. I then spoke earlier in the week. I sound like I've been on a royal tour here, but I went somewhere else.
Aristos.
And I saw another duke, and I said to him,
Rupert does Debrett's.
Yeah, well, I was sort of doing Debrett's, and I went up to this duke, and I said, have you got the invite? He said, no, but I'm not expecting to, and if I do go and my wife can't come along, I'm in deep trouble, he said. But anyway, the point being, there is a consensus that you sort of understand. Disappointed, and they would perhaps love to have gone. But actually, when you look, there were 8,000 people in that abbey before, which must have been a health and safety nightmare. The fact there are 2,000, I think people are going to have to just say, yes, we're going to have to look at it differently and just accept that the era is a different one.
And if within that 2,000, a lot more ordinary people, members of the public who've done extraordinary things. And so you're going to get members of the aristocracy who just don't make the cut.
Absolutely. And I think, King Charles wanted this coronation to be different. He wanted it to be slimmed down. He wanted, or there was talks of having, a multi-faith service. And of course, like you said, lots of people who've done great things in their communities during COVID or otherwise, they've had their invitations going out as well. So yes, they're taking out quite a big chunk of the guest list. So unfortunately, the aristocracy are going to have to stay at home and watch it on TV like millions of others.
Sarah Ferguson, one of those who is NFI.
I thought that was a real shame, actually.
I was kind of expecting to see her on the guest list, given that she was at Sandringham.
No,
to be honest, yeah.
Well, there's a big demarcation, isn't there? Yes, Charles and Camilla invited her to Sandringham, Christmas at Sandringham for the first time at the end of last year, which was obviously brilliant because she'd never been able to go before because of Philip, and she'd had to celebrate Christmas away from her girls every year, which must have been awful. So that was great. I thought, oh, lovely. But Charles is obviously making a real demarcation between working royals and also actual members of the family. And although she lives with Prince Andrew, she is not a member of the family because they are still divorced.
I think they've made the right shout there. Look, she's going to the concert the next day.
Actually, let's be honest, it'll probably be a bit more fun.
And it takes away the spotlight because, again, the Duke of York is part of the sort of complications of the royal family. And what are we doing? We're talking about the complication that is the Duke of York. And it is there she is living with him and they're not married, but it's all They are very close and they're very supportive of each other. But the Duke of York is a little sort of problem for the king to deal with.
She's been talking about that relationship on television this week, hasn't she?
Yeah, she was on a morning show this morning and saying, you know, the spotlight should come off Prince Andrew, people should leave him alone, and then talking about the relationship. She loves their relationship now. And, you know, I think if you want the spotlight to come off Prince Andrew, just stop mentioning his name in public, right?
Stop talking.
Stop talking about
Go away.
it. And he should stop throwing his toys out the pram. I don't want to move out of my 30-bedroom house. And what about my allowance? And my diamond shoes are too tight. Just stop speaking. Stop speaking and then stop speaking about him, Sarah Ferguson.
The King's coronation procession will be led by a cross that includes religious relics gifted to the monarch by the Pope. 2 shards of the true cross, which is said to be the cross used in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, have been given to Charles by Pope Francis to mark the royal occasion. The small fragments have been incorporated into the Cross of Wales. I mean, this is quite extraordinary when you think about the history that this cross now bears.
I think it's amazing, and I thought it was an absolutely fantastic gift by Pope Francis to King Charles. A couple of fragments. I mean, I think perhaps we should read splinters.
5mm and 10mm.
I mean, that's
you know,
that's
tiny little bits.
Tiny little bits from the actual cross that Jesus Christ was crucified on by the Romans. And it's fascinating that it's been incorporated into a cross. Now, these fragments were given to Charles by the Pope. Charles has now given these fragments in the shape of a special cross to the Welsh Church. It's been blessed by the Archbishop of Wales, and it's a very green cross, as well as it's got silver, you know, encased in silver, because it's made of recycled woods. I think a tree that fell down and some of the wood's been reused.
Bullion from the Royal Mint that was left over.
Yes, so we know that Charles is a recycling devotee, a green king, and I kind of love the tie-in with the green man on the invitation, his kind of with the green cross, although this is going to be very, very important. It's going to be held at the head of the procession going into Westminster Abbey. And I was really struck, actually, there's a lot of Welsh within this service. Music, the royal harpist, of course he was the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales, yeah.
So there's a lot of love for Wales, and that wasn't fake. That was, he loves Wales, and that's very much reflected in the service.
Well, more details have also been emerging about what the big day on Saturday, the 6th of May, is going to look and sound like. The King, as Emily was describing, has made his music choices with 12 new compositions written. Charles has been an active supporter of classical music for many years and has overseen, influenced and been personally involved in the commissioning process. It's also been announced that Katy Perry will be among those performing at the concert on May the 7th at Windsor Castle. We've talked a lot on previous episodes of The Royalty about who was going to say yes and who'd said no to the concert. Who's going to be there?
Yeah. So we have Katy Perry. We have 3/5 of Take That. Not sure it's the best 3. Just saying.
Let's
Robbie.
not start
No
that.
Robbie.
That's a debate
Listen.
for another day.
Listen, as the former vice president of the Take That fan club in Scotland, I have my say. It's a whole other episode. Take That, we have Andrea Bocelli. I think what's been really interesting actually is when you, on social media, the backlash that Katy Perry has got for
saying yes.
For saying yes and for headlining the concert has been very interesting. And I think that's why it's been so difficult to nail down, you know, a popular headline performer. It was written that King Charles really wanted, you know, Adele, Ed Sheeran, Robbie Williams, Kylie, Elton John, you know, all these kind of people who, you know, have scheduling clashes and, you know, are down a mine or something, you know,
Out of the country with no transatlantic flights to be found.
Are available at all on the day of the concert. And I think that actually shows that people are, you know, kind of afraid to associate.
Wary.
Yeah, wary is a really good word. I mean, Lionel Richie's also going to be there.
Yeah.
Have us all dancing on the ceiling. See what I did there. I hope it will be fun. You're going to have the Coronation Choir as well, which I think will be.
I'm really looking forward to
will
that.
be incredible. So let's hope Katy Perry pulls it out the bag.
Like, what a tough act to follow after the Platinum Jubilee.
Haven't they
Well,
just?
yeah, that's the thing.
You see
Diana Ross.
that they went, you know, starting with Paddington Bear and then
Rod Stewart, Diana Ross.
I mean,
well, Rod, one or two naff notes from Rod. And,
Hey,
We'll allow him. It's Rod.
Okay, I'm in dangerous territory here. Clearly, I'm not going to say anything about Robbie Williams.
Please, Rupert, I can't take it.
But that's one of the problems. I think that was such a big deal, and they had a pretty good list there. And actually, to go again, and one I think Sir Elton John, you might say, he is doing a concert tour at the moment. I don't know. He's obviously getting on a bit, but managing his time. But given his relationship...
Well, but very close to Diana and also very close to Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's one but an icon. And you thought he loves in front of Windsor Castle might have been one of the big hurrah.
But
I don't know.
again, I think it's, Queen Elizabeth II, a Saturn affinity for her, King Charles, that same affinity is not being afforded. I think there's an element of that.
And it's interesting. Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Afua, but it's interesting because when he was Prince of Wales, Kylie would come and play for him. He put on concerts and she did. So I don't quite understand the apathy with these big names. I mean, nothing's been confirmed, but, Kylie was quite overt that obviously there's a big cause of republicanism in Australia. You've got effectively a Republican Prime Minister in Albanese, so perhaps that's why she didn't want to say yes. But I didn't quite understand. I mean, is Charles not cool? Is King Charles just going to be totally uncool? Was he cool as Prince of Wales but not as king?
Well, I mean, we talked a lot about whether the Spice Girls were going to reform.
Do you think there might be a rabbit out of the hat?
There could be a surprise.
It could be. You never
and
know.
then you go, we've got one, and then maybe Sir Elton will come on.
Celine Dion, wouldn't that be good?
Oh, yes.
I love a bit of Celine.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Commonwealth.
Now, I hope you're all feeling hungry because King Charles and Queen Camilla have chosen a quiche as their signature dish for the upcoming coronation, but the decision has received mixed reactions. So there's only one way to find out. Bring on the quiche. Thank you. This is producer Matt, a future Bake Off contestant. I'm not going to let him take credit. It was made by the staff canteen chefs very kindly for us. Shall we give it a taste? This is chosen by, excuse fingers, there you are.
Thank you,
Emily, to you. This was made by the Palace chef, Mark Flanagan, a recipe chosen by Charles and Camilla. Charles, a big fan of cheese and eggs.
Thank you.
Apparently.
Okay.
Man after my own heart, and it's a vegetarian quiche.
It's a vegetarian quiche.
But can I say quiche? I remember the quiche being fashionable in the 70s, and quiches to me, if you don't make it properly,
Yeah.
I remember a picnic, because my mother was the worst cook ever, trying to make quiche and going on, God rest her soul. But she would have...
You wouldn't have dared say that when she was alive.
Oh, I did say it, and she knew it. But anyway, so making quiche is an art form.
Well, I was
And
going
it
to
just
volunteer
doesn't
to
feel very-
myself to make one for you, but then I thought,
You
well,
haven't
that
got
could
the
be a
time,
disaster. I haven't got the
Sarah.
time, but it could be a disaster. Time is a thing. This is meant to be a sharing plate
Yes.
for... Should we try it?
Yeah,
A
it's fine.
sharing
So
plate for
what's
street
actually
parties.
in it?
So it's got tarragon,
Yep.
spinach,
Yep.
broad beans, cheese, egg, short crust pastry.
It's a
Not
shame
bad.
that there's not a cake. I would have preferred a coronation cake.
Oh, I'm a savoury
Oh,
girl.
okay,
so
fair enough.
this is better for me. But is it going to rival coronation chicken?
It's not bad.
No.
You can really taste the tarragon.
That's all I can taste.
Okay.
If you're not a fan of tarragon, you'll
I
have
mean,
to
I love a bit of
substitute
tarragon.
it.
Good.
It's nice, isn't
And
it?
I love
like it, it's
raw
really nice.
beans, but...
Yeah. Oh, is it not working for you? Oh,
I'm sorry. With all due respect
chef.
to the chef here, I'm presuming he's worked religiously to the recipe. That's
Is it not for you?
Like coronation chicken is still being eaten by all and
I love a
sundry.
coronation chicken. I said
70
earlier I have
years
my
on.
coronation
And
chicken crisps.
when it started, we were in food rationing. There was hardly anything you can buy in the supermarket or your local shop.
Mayonnaise was a luxury.
Yeah, and spiced it up, and it's worked for 70 years. I'm not sure in 70 years' time
We're going to be eating this.
whoever's doing this
This is
program
much more
then,
cost efficient to make, though, than something with chicken in, for example.
Yeah, but
and it suits a
blind
vegetarian
baking pastry,
Yeah.
who has time for that?
You can buy ready-made short crust
Oh, yeah, of
pastry, can't you?
course.
That
Roll
would
it.
be mine.
That's what we'll be doing, Emily. It's not bad.
I like it.
I don't hate it.
Sorry.
You won't. You. Oh, what a waste!
No, I'll have another piece.
That's lunch
Sorry.
sorted.
3
Sorry.
out of 4's not bad.
It's not.
Not bad.
3 out of 4.
It gets my vote, but I coronation chicken just edges it.
Yeah,
For
I
me.
agree.
Well, we've got a lot of eating to get on with. That is all we've got time for this week. My thanks to Afua, Rupert and Emily. If you want to join in with the debate, make sure you leave a comment below. We will be back next week with all of the latest on the royal family. We hope you can join us. We'll see you then.